Hello everyone. Today I have a very exciting game between Daniel Cawdery and Piotr Goluch. And Cawdery with the black pieces was a 2426, and this is back in black in 2017 against Goluch Piotr at 2288. And he was an FM back then, but he's now an IM. And we see the game played. He's a Polish player, and the game was played in the Czech Open Party Beast tournament in 2017. So we're dealing with a game that's about 3 years old. So, okay, let's dive into the game. We've got d4, knight f6, c4, g6, and then move knight f3. In a previous game, we looked at a Cawdery game where his opponent went f3 and he went d5, and he went on to win. So this opponent has prepped something different. Knight f3, the knight's variation, bishop g7, g3, and castles, bishop t2. And now d5, because you need to reclaim something on the center. White's already got the central pawns, but he hasn't castled, so you use that tempo to play in the center. And c takes d5, knight takes d5, all mainline stuff, and we see Cawdery's knight make its way to b6, as it usually does. Like all of these games are enlightening type of games. Castles, knight b6, knight c3, and move knight c6. Both developing moves. And now white goes e3. Different way to play would be by going d5, knight a5. This is going for the center immediately, but it doesn't necessarily take or anything away from white, from black, and black progresses like this, gets his pawn to c6. Some players prefer going bishop f4. Some prefer going bishop g5 in these positions. After the move knight a4, e4, defending the pawn. Now c6, attacking that center. Here's the moment where the players prefer to go g5 or f4. You want to go bishop f4 if you don't like black going h6 and g5, and you want to go bishop g5 if you do like that. So bishop g5 would be met by h6, and then after most of these moves, you could expect something like this knight making its way back into the game, attacking that pawn, and now you could expect something like g5. So this small nuance whether you prefer one of the positions, but as you can see, the position in general seems kind of active for black, and you don't necessarily want this for an IM, especially if you've got a weak pawn now, not defended by any of the other pawns, will not ever really be. So we see the move e3 instead in the game, not d5. e3 a bit more of a slow way to play the position, safer way. Both rooks get developed, and now the move a5. It protects these two knights from this pawn storm, secures outposts, gets a stake into the queen side. Queen e2 played, something like a3 is playable, but it just be met by a4, and you might see something like a maneuver like this. Or a4 immediately could just be met by knight b4, which you probably don't want. So he just simply goes queen e2. But this is all theory. We've got e5, and this is a moment where Cawdery is Cawdery and not another player, where he decides to go for the center immediately. Decides this rook should be active. Doesn't want to go for the slow maneuvering of the bishop via e6, which is mainline. You see the move e5, and d takes e5. Now, taking with the pawn and taking with the knight seems a lot the same, but it could actually be a different story, and I don't see it really explored so far. So taking with the pawn, black's not forced to recapture the pawn immediately. No other pieces defending it in the meanwhile. So something like queen e7 is playable, and then after the captures and captures, you could recapture with your queen, and then probably move to some kind of active square. While recapturing with a knight kind of forces black to not want to lose a second pawn or see a knight stay on e5 immediately. I haven't seen anyone go d takes and then queen e7 before, so I could have stumbled on a new line if you want to start using that in your games. So, but in the game, we've got d takes and knight takes, so it doesn't matter which way he captured. Cawdery would have gone for knight takes, and knight takes and bishop takes. His idea with bishop takes we'll see in a second, but rook takes is playable, but now you're closing the eyes of the bishop. Okay, we've got the moves e4, prepping f4, taking a claim to the center, just the perfectly sound move, opening the eyes of this bishop. And we see the move bishop e6. And this is developing the last bishop. And we'll see how the bishop gets developed very nicely. And this position has been seen many times, but okay. So the move f4 played. And now Cawdery's idea, he wants to play with tempo. He doesn't want to retreat and see something like f5. He goes bishop takes c3 immediately. And though you're giving up the bishop pair, white isn't immediately showing how he's getting onto this long diagonal and exploiting these threats. The queen isn't on a dark square yet, and this pawn could be a weakness. This is now an outpost. But still, I think this is pretty fine for white. And now Cawdery's idea of getting rid of this bishop to go bishop d5, and now this queen ensures that this bishop can't be taken, and he is opposing the bishop on g2. So he's improved this bishop a lot from where it was on c6. Now, white gets to work on his dark squared bishop. Firstly, he goes queen f2, shifting the weight of the queen to the dark squares, also unleashing the attack on the bishop, so that needs to be met, keeping his bishop on the diagonal, and the move bishop a3 starts developing the bishop. And you can't really go for something like c4 and then develop the bishop, so this is kind of the only way. And now Cawdery goes for queen f6. Other ways to play the position could be something like to maneuver the knight via these squares. It's not too clear what happens. Queen f6 is interesting, and it was played in a 2011 game, so probably Cawdery did some research and found this move to be quite nice, because you're attacking the pawn immediately, provoking something like e5, queen d6, where you finally show how you improved your position by getting this bishop here, getting rid of this one, and playing against the weak king and pawn. A lot of room for your knight to find a nice outpost somewhere. Okay, so this is kind of the idea. d5 obviously not played, but the move which makes the game new in this position, bishop c5, just giving the pawn up temporarily, because you could get it back immediately. But that's not really the idea. The idea is that if this pawn is taken, you're probably getting a very nice position with this bishop on this diagonal and some more activity. Possibly sacks on the c6 because of your strong bishop now. So this is a very nice idea. Bishop c5, and Cawdery doesn't take that pawn. Quite rightly so, I think. I don't think it would have been a good choice to go that route. And so since he doesn't want to lose the pawn, and he's already moved his bishop to b6 in the game, he can start moving after the knight to b6. He's allowed to move it again. He goes to d7, and the knight's making its way back to the start square, onto the king side, where it feels that you need another minor piece to defend the king, because the following moves are going to be played. Bishop d4. This bishop has made its way around the world of the c3 square and is finally now on a very good square. The queen retreats, not to e6, which could walk into f5, but rather to e7, keeping some weight on the dark squares, possibly needed if you need to go queen f8 one day. g4 played, going after the black king, basically saying that I've got the bishop pair there on diagonals, my king is safe, here comes the storm, my queen is going to be right there. And now Cawdery kind of makes a provocative move. He could have probably just gone rook a d8, developed more slowly, but he goes knight f6 immediately. And this kind of provokes white to try and enter onto the square h6. Going something like queen g3 would have been a lot better for white, and trying to go h4, protecting the g4 pawn, obviously, because that's what this knight's doing, and then doubling here and going stuff like f5 and then h4 would have been a bit stronger. But he wants to exploit this h6 weakness immediately, and it's quite fine. Queen h4, but Cawdery obviously provoked this line, and he wanted to go knight takes e4 and trade queens and probably play one pawn up, have a draw against these bishops. But okay, the queen's not traded. The move is g5. White wants to make his way to g7, and now Cawdery plays the move f5. F5 is actually quite fine. but a bit strong would have been queen d7. The point being that whenever this queen comes up, you can meet it with queen g5. So that, for instance, let's say queen h6 and f6, covering that square. Something like bishop takes e4 isn't that threatening because of the move queen g4 check, and now suddenly white is lost. Also stuff like rook takes e4 just doesn't seem to do a lot, because still this is a threat. And then after trying to exploit this weakness, if bishop takes, I think it's a bit weaker because of the move bishop takes g2, and main threat's still covered. While f takes, still bishop takes g2, and you're never really getting an opportunity to play something even like f6 and get your queen onto h7. In a lot of these lines, black can even just continue going king f3, just bring in your other rook, and this should be over for white in no time. Okay, so Cawdery doesn't go for this queen d7 plan. It's a bit stronger, would have been a more tactical solution to the position. Maybe he was afraid of rook d1, but then again the knight just retreats to d6, and then stuff like queen h6 could be met by the strong knight f5, and there aren't any really strong discoveries. So who knows if there was a problem somewhere, but probably just ghosts in the position. Especially when the queen gets to h6, you start seeing stuff. In the game, however, we see the move f5 immediately, not the move queen d7, and it's taken rightly so. G takes f6, and the position has reached equality after queen f7. The knight is safeguarded for the moment, but f5, strong move, attacking the king, attacking the knight, is met by the knight retreating, and bishop takes e6 first, and rook takes, and then knight takes f5, getting rid of that pawn. Now, in this moment, the position is still equal. White should probably try and go queen e4, and after b takes e6, just take that pawn. And the point being why it's equal is because this rook cannot enter. This knight is on an outpost on a light square, and the pawns are relatively safe except for this one. White's king is also pretty exposed. This is why this position is equal. There's material equality, and as the engine says so. Now, in the game, however, after knight takes f5, Goluch was a bit fancy, and he spotted an opportunity to play with some material imbalance. He goes bishop takes b7, holding onto this bishop, giving up the queen, rook takes, and now he's playing with bishop and a rook against the queen, bishop, rook, two bishops, a rook against a queen and a knight, and he's got a pretty solid f6 pawn. And this position is actually winning for black, but even with the computer's help, it could be strange to play it. So now rook e7 is a threat, so you want to avoid that, so you go knight f5. The queen is luckily still covering this d5 square, otherwise these bishops are just sawing through at your king. Knight e5 probably also threatening some trades, so bishop e5 is a recommendation by the computer. Goluch goes, and I like the move he plays, he goes rook b1, threatening these back rank types of things, and there's only really one way to meet this move. So you can pause the video for a moment if you want to, and see if you could find it, because Daniel Cawdery did not find it, and it's a tricky one, how to play and win this position for black. Okay, and I'm going on. So in the game, queen takes a2 was played, and this unfortunately blunders the game into a draw. After the move rook b5, out of all moves, threatening bishop d5 check, and there's really only one defense for this tactic. Remember, also going check, the king can find safety on h3. You can go look at those lines. The queen can never really check further than these two squares, and this is quite a massive tactic. And if the queen even ends on a3 and you try something, then through running with the king, bishop d5 is still a massive threat with back rank ideas. This is why the move rook b5 is so strong. It's preparing bishop d5. And the only way to play against it is through the move c5. But now the game is suddenly just a dead draw. After the rook goes to b1, b8, king f7, and check. The king can never move back. Going to one of the light squares just gets f7, and then another check and a queen. Going to this dark square, simply walks into bishop takes c5 check, forcing you to the light square, and then you need to give up your queen for that pawn. And you're definitely losing. And so you only have one real option, that's king e6. But now after the move rook b6 check, the king cannot go any further, so you need to retreat back to f7. And this is where the position draws, supposedly. But our FIDE master, who back then was, I think, just under 30 years old, he had a different idea than drawing. After the move king e6 in the game, he goes to the move f7. And f7 is probably not the worst of all moves, but now Cawdery really goes for it. Firstly, white's threatening to make a queen, and your queen is just out of play. So he uses the remaining three pieces he really has just to knock at this king. And he does so first with the move knight h4. This bishop is temporarily not guarding g2, so making a queen now would walk into mate. A strong move, however, would be just to go rook b3 now. And this is also just a crazy move. It opens the eyes of the bishop, and now something like king takes could be met by bishop d5 check, and suddenly white is winning. And also taking the rook, which is probably the best response. Remember, also checking moves here would probably just be met by king f2. And now you've also got the threat of making a queen, bringing these two bishops, and allowing this is actually better for white, I believe, in some situations, because the mating nets are pretty clear. Black is getting away though, we don't need to go into that, but rook b3 really just a stunning move to need to find. And black's best hope for a win here isn't to go check, but to take that rook, and then after there's a queen on the board, then to try checking from this side and maybe pick up the bishop and try and play with the extra pawn. But I'm not seeing anything else on a draw here with these open kings and these queens around. Rook b3, the last moment of the game to really just get something out of the game, but it wasn't played. We have the move f8 equals knight check. Really just an interesting move. And for the time being, there's material equality. We've got a rook for a knight and two pawns. We've got 3 minors for the queen. And now we've only got 2 pawns remaining on each side. Just crazy. But the computer doesn't think this is equal. It thinks it's better for black. -4. Okay, so now after the queen is made, now Cawdery really, the queen isn't made. After the knight is made, the king just comes up. And temporarily it does so with tempo, because you need to figure out what to do with that bishop. And he plays the right move, he pins that king. Now the king just moves up again, king g4. It's coming for the mate. He just needs to coordinate these 3 pieces and the queen. Now the king moved with tempo again, so how are you sorting this out? Rook takes c5, a bit stronger, because now you've got bishop e6 check ideas. He goes for a worse option to save the bishop. He goes bishop takes c5. And now the evaluation just says it's completely over. After the move knight f3 check. King can't go to h1, h2 mate, so king f1. And now we see this fork. He's picking up some material. Cawdery doesn't go for that fork immediately. He does. He first includes this check to pick up a pawn, and then goes back, because the king can never escape the might of this knight, mating the king on both sides. So king f1 is kind of the only move here. Queen c4 check. King needs to go back to f2, and now the rook's taken. the king is first checked, and then the knight's taken. But already in this situation, the game is over. You can see this knight isn't contributing at all. It's kind of stuck for the time being, and this pawn is just rolling on. These bishops struggle to coordinate and stop the pawn because of the queen. And this king is pretty strong and also playing an active role in this position. Okay, so we've got the move queen b2 check, bishop e2, and now a4. Bishop's temporarily pinned, bishop d4, some last hopes to stop a1, queen, and we've got a3, king f3, opening up that, and now we've got just a simple check and trapping that knight. Knight can't go anywhere, and the game was only 2 moves long. Bishop c5 defends the knight, but now after the final strong king move by Daniel Cawdery, the game's over. King e4 check. The king that moved with tempo, and basically it can't be stopped by these checks. Your king needs to move back, and no matter where your king goes, it's going to be over. So the computer recommends running with your king, but you kind of need your king around to coordinate the bishops, because now the pawn is just running on and there's nothing you can do. Just a phenomenal game. I liked the variations both sides missed, and it was quite interesting that Cawdery never blundered the game, as did Goluch. Goluch blundered the game, I think, twice, but Cawdery blundered a drawish, or at least a solid draw once, and then the second time also quite a solid draw. So you can see the difference, blundering the game versus blundering the draw. You could see who really kept the pressure up in the game, and it was pretty good, with a very satisfying queening of the knight, and then queen trumping 3 minor pieces because of another queen entering the board, and a solid king. Thank you.